Hi there, guys. This is Rant Radio, and we're coming to you on JNL Live. And today's topic is dealing with FEMA and the Red Cross. And if you guys have been watching our stream over the weekend, you will have seen that we were protesting outside of Bloomberg's house in Manhattan. And we were joined there by the Nurses Association, people from Occupy Sandy, local Sandy victims, the residents themselves, along with local supporters. And we were there to raise our voices about the lack of compassion and the lack of resources that have been available since the aftermath. Now, obviously, this is not a storm that has a quick recovery. There's a lot of building that needs to happen, and there are a lot of complications that are coming as the weather gets colder and as houses struggle to fight back against mold. Now, what happened when we were there? Well, of course, the police showed up, and our dissent was quickly quelled by the forces that be. But this week, as I promised, I wanted to focus directly on FEMA and the Red Cross and touch a little bit about the city and Mayor Bloomberg, aka Moldberg, and what has been going on and the attitudes that have been getting thrown around regarding what has actually been done for the victims of this hurricane. Now, I'm also going to dive a little bit into FEMA's actual purpose and tell you a little bit about the controversy surrounding the Red Cross over the years. Because what's gone on with Sandy is not the first time that people have had issues with both of these groups. So I'm going to dive right in with FEMA. Now, FEMA dates back to 1979, and it claims to be committed to the core values, as according to their website, of compassion, fairness, integrity, and respect. So they paint a fine picture of civil service and ensuring the safety of all American citizens. That sounds all well and good, but we'll talk a little bit more about what FEMA doesn't tell you they do. Now, FEMA works very closely with Homeland Security, and they give a lot of money to Homeland Security, which comes out of their grant program, out of their funding. So how much does Homeland Security get? They've received $530 million in 2011 alone in funding. And since 2002, they've received $35 billion from FEMA. Now, I don't know why a group like Homeland Security needs so much funding from FEMA. They're run by the government. Can't they get their own funding? So I'm a little confused as to why FEMA factors them into their budget so much. So the 2013 budget request for FEMA, it's close to $280 million for this year. Now, what I noticed when I looked at the budget on the website, which is available for anybody to view, I noticed something a little bit strange. There was a trend in what was happening. This is actually a decrease in their budget from last year. So where did they make the cuts? Well, they reduced areas like protection, response, recovery, mitigation, and mission support. Which area of FEMA did they not touch? Well, the area of the administration and regional offices. That area was not affected at all. No reduction in positions at all. And the other area, the centrally managed accounts, they asked for $94.18 million. And I'm having a hard time understanding why the centrally managed accounts needs that much money. So about $100 million is allocated towards emergency food and shelter. But it says on their site that this money is not necessarily for disaster victims. This is money that they put into helping out the homeless, the people who are in poverty, the needy people in America. And if you ask me, $100 million doesn't cover it. Not to mention that these natural disasters leave thousands homeless, thousands displaced, and some of them never go back home because they don't get the help they need. The resources don't come, and some people just give up. And if they don't get sick trying to do the work themselves, they end up in tent cities, or they end up in trailers, and some of them just end up on the streets. If you don't have family to crash on a couch, then you just might be out of luck. A lot of people don't believe in waiting for FEMA to come through with the red tape and get them into their homes. They sometimes don't want to wait for the bureaucratic process. They just want to jump in and get it done because they're anxious to get their lives going again. And so that's what we're talking about today, is why is there so much red tape? Why are these bureaucratic processes being clung to with clenched fists? Why don't we make exceptions for these citizens who never expect these things to happen to them? All they want is to get a piece of their lives back. And honestly, if you talk to most people that have been impacted this time around with Hurricane Sandy, FEMA does little to nothing to make this process any easier. It's just more headaches and more paperwork and more time that people are wasting trying to get answers. And that's what the protest this weekend was about. People want answers. One of the slogans that I saw was "Build Back Better." Does FEMA plan on actually factoring that into their budget? Is that part of their disaster relief fund? I didn't see a lot of that in there. There isn't a lot of preemptive language about how we can strengthen these low-lying areas, how we can strengthen the seashore where people live and that are naturally vulnerable. They just want to give rapid repairs money. You just want to wait for FEMA to send you a check for 31 grand and hope that covers some of the damage. It doesn't cut it. A lot of these communities need to be started completely over. They need to be elevated. They need to be strengthened. They don't need a Band-Aid. They need real change. And FEMA doesn't seem to come through with that. They deploy their people to come down and help you with the paperwork, but we don't see any people on the ground. So what is this $780 million budget for? I don't really know. They've got a lot of rhetoric on their website, and if you guys want to take the time to read through it all, like I tried, you're probably going to end up with a headache like I was. So when it comes to FEMA doing its job, they're falling short. They've spent $3 billion on trailers, which were trailers that were used during the Hurricane Katrina disaster, and these are trailers that are owned by the government, and then they are dispersed as needed and recollected by the government. So they're always government property. However, these trailers, which the residents of this disaster, Hurricane Katrina, found out, they were filled with formaldehyde. And that kind of stuff, being in a trailer, not only blows my mind in the first place, but has detrimental effects on your health. So lots of lawsuits were filed against FEMA for these trailers, and they settled a lot of them out of court, and these trailers were pulled. I don't know what happened to them, but all we have now is about 50 trailers that are sitting empty in a lot, waiting to be deployed. They're somewhere in Maryland, and why aren't they going out? Well, I'll tell you why. You're not going to see any trailers coming to New York City because Bloomberg has stated, we don't need trailers. We're working on people getting back into their homes. And that's just him relying on his little program, Rapid Repairs, which he thinks is going to cover all the damage. But so far, what has Rapid Repairs done as we're over a month into this disaster aftermath? They've repaired about 12,000 homes. That still leaves about 11,000 homes that are destroyed and awaiting help. And I don't think that that's an accurate number for all the homes. I think that that just covers Staten Island and maybe the Rockaways. I think that the number could actually be bigger. But again, a lot of times the city downplays the actual destruction because they don't want to look bad. They don't want you to know how many areas still are without power. They don't want you to know how many areas are still without heat, and how a lot of these places are just going to get bulldozed, and there's nothing FEMA's going to do about it, and there's nothing this mayor's going to do about it, and these homeowners are just out of luck. And there's a huge disparity in the type of aid that people get, depending on your zip code, depending on your economic situation, or your knowledge of the system itself. You may be getting different accommodations. I've talked to some people that were put up in hotels. I've talked to some people that are staying in schools, some people that are staying in converted buildings, and they're sleeping on cots, which there have been cases of them breaking down on people in the middle of the night. But the fact is, this is one disaster, and yet there are different scenarios and different accommodations for people. And some are staying in tent cities. So what do we have here? We have people who have to make a decision. They either wait around until they can get through the red tape, they take on the construction themselves and risk poisoning themselves with mold inhalation, or they live in these tent cities, which from what I've heard from articles I read and accounts in Monmouth County, New Jersey, where there are these tent cities built, those conditions are so bad that some residents would rather go back to their destroyed homes than spend another night in these sad excuses for shelter. They're cold. There have been reports of people being able to see their breath as they're huddled in blankets in these tents. So where's the help? Why are there millions of dollars pouring in from relief concerts and telethons and all of these commercials that show how much they're doing for the community, and it's just not trickling down? Does it sound familiar? Once again, this idea of trickle-down economics just doesn't seem to work. So who's giving the roadblock in this operation? Are there some little beavers building a dam at the top of this food chain? Obviously, the corporate elite are stalling in this operation, and it's costing us lives. Hurricane Katrina alone suffered thousands of deaths and injuries and displaced people because the incompetence of these organizations from coming through. And some of them wouldn't even go into the areas because they didn't want to risk their well-being. But they expect the citizens to brave these conditions? I don't see how that makes any sense. So a little bit more about FEMA's role. Now, we know that FEMA claims that they're here to do disaster relief. They're here to do preventative help. They're here to provide aid to people on the ground, and they work with Homeland Security to help expedite that process. However, if you look at some of the things that have been said about FEMA in the past, it paints a very different picture of what FEMA is actually about. And one in particular, General Frank Salzito, who was the former chief of the Civil Security Division of FEMA, had this to say about FEMA's role. And this was said in 1983 at a conference, mind you. He sees FEMA's role as a new frontier in the protection of individual and governmental leaders from assassination, and of civil and military installations from sabotage and or attack. And here's the good part. As well as protection or prevention of dissident groups from gaining access to U.S. opinion or a global audience in time of crisis. So what does that tell you? That tells you that if people get a little bit annoyed at the lack of competence from this organization, or they have a problem with the fact that FEMA works hand in hand with the government, and you have a problem with that, well, FEMA's there to smite that out right away. They're there to make sure that you are silenced, because nobody wants dissent. Everybody wants to just go along with what these programs have in store for our futures. And as it doesn't take a conspiracy theorist to come up with, the signs are already there, that they are building camps to take us away. They are looking to enslave a population that wants to disagree. And we have a lot of reasons to disagree. And the protest over this weekend is a very small example of what happens when you try to voice your concern over the lack of resources being deployed to areas that need it most, and how the residents don't seem to have a voice, and it falls on deaf ears when they go to their town hall meetings and the officials throw up their hands and say, I don't know what to tell you people. That's just simply not enough. So what has happened? The FEMA organization has received millions of dollars to ensure that these FEMA camps can be built. And where did that money come from? It came from Halliburton. Now, why would Halliburton want such a stake in ensuring that all of these camps are built and that we have enough space to enslave and imprison anybody that has a problem? Well, a lot of people have a problem with Halliburton, and I think they want to see that their pockets continue to be filled and that there's nobody in the way when they do so. They rule the oil industry, and they want to rule the water industry. And these are things that control our everyday lives. So eventually, as the oppression of this state continues to bear down on us, people will get more angry. And FEMA is geared up and ready to put you away for doing just that, expressing your First Amendment rights. But unfortunately, because of President Carter in 1979, there was a sweeping consolidation of power and responsibility, and a lot was handed over to FEMA. So in the event that executive orders are signed with the wave of a pen by the President and the Attorney General, FEMA has the authority to carry out all sorts of orders and all sorts of ways that they will strip you not only of your rights, but of your personal property, of your storage units, of your ability to travel, of your ability to use cell phones, of your ability to get media news. It'll all disappear, and all it takes is the signature. And that is where we're at, is that this organization is a facade. It claims to be one thing, but behind closed doors, it is gearing up to do a complete other thing. And none of this is on their site, of course, and none of this is talked about in the media. Why is it that when we talk about these camps and we talk about the fact that FEMA has so much control just waiting to be implemented, nothing seems to be said of it? You've got to seek out people that are deemed crazy to get any information like that. And of course, over the last few weeks, I have become a fan of watching a lot of these shows. And of course, I always take things with a grain of salt. I always take things at face value. But there's a lot of evidence to show that FEMA is not interested in showing any integrity or fairness or respect. If push comes to shove and martial law is declared, they have the authorization to take you away and to take everything from you, and there will be nothing that you can do about it. And I don't like to scare anybody, but I think it's important that we're all reminded of where we're at and that we see little signs of this every day. We see little signs of these organizations, not just FEMA and the Red Cross even, but people parading around to be one thing, but in fact they're a completely other. I mean, Monsanto is a perfect example, that they have taken over the food supply, but actually they're not liberating anybody. They're not providing anything good. They say they want to feed the world, but in fact they just want to keep everybody dependent on them and to poison them. And who knows when we'll see the effects long-term, widespread, of that kind of devastation and that kind of hostile takeover. So this is where we're at. FEMA, I'm sorry, but I've got your number, and your cover's blown, and a lot of people are waking up to the sick reality of what you're really about, and that our entire government over the years has been in cahoots and has just allowed the doors to be opened for FEMA to do just about whatever they want and not have to answer to anyone. So I'm going to move on a little bit to the Red Cross. And the Red Cross, of course, as of 2010, signed a memorandum with FEMA that they were going to work hand in hand with each other. So since 2010, they've been all buddy-buddy. Now, to me, this is a serious conflict of interest. Now, the Red Cross, historically, since 1881, has been a humanitarian organization. They claim to be a nonprofit, and they have done good work over the years. Don't get me wrong. The fact that they have donated blood is a great thing. The fact that they have provided relief in devastated areas is a great thing. But there's a lot of controversy over how they've allocated funds and things that they've done behind closed doors that only people who have quit working with them have been willing to admit to anyone. So the Red Cross, their budget in 2010 alone was $3.5 billion. Now, some of the areas that they cover, they do disaster relief, they do community services for the needy, they are the largest blood donor, they have educational programs on health and safety, and they're a relief effort and have development programs in other nations as well. And even John D. Rockefeller in the beginning was the original supporter who helped them find their first national headquarters spot, which is in Washington, D.C., and he helped fund the building of that. So they've done a lot of good, but there's a couple spots in the last 10 years or 15 years or so where we start to see something a little bit hazy. It does go back as far as 1989, where we saw $10 million was moved from an earthquake fund, and it was allocated to other things. And there have been these instances of holdbacks where the money pours in because people are urgent to help those in need. But Red Cross stalls, and sometimes it seems that they're just waiting until time passes enough where they can then put the money in a different space and use it for a different reason. Now, on their site, they have the current disaster fund that you can donate to, and there's the ongoing funds that always come up. So while you can donate to Hurricane Sandy relief, you can also donate to the broader fund, which can be used for anything that the Red Cross claims their budget needs. But as far as the money that has been brought in already, we've had 188 million as of my research, which is probably more by now, that has been raised, but only 100 million of it has been allocated to be used through the end of December. And there really hasn't been much talk on what they plan to use the rest of that money for. They claim it's for long-term rebuilding, but that's not Red Cross's expertise. They want it to be a long-term way to help the community, but all we really need right now is the rebuilding of homes. Red Cross focuses on food and shelter, but they're not a construction company, and they don't send in workers to help you do demo. They don't send in workers to help you put up walls, or knock down floors, or paint, or do all the things like plumbing and electricity that need to be reinstalled. They don't handle that. For the most part, what I see Red Cross doing is driving around with food trucks, with a megaphone, hoping you can chase them down like the ice cream man and get a sandwich. And that is what more than one area of residents has reported to me, that if they saw them at all, it was a truck with some food. And while a warm meal is nice, honestly, people are getting donations from all over, and the communities themselves have stepped up to fill that role. What could really be used now is a way that people can get heat and hot water and electricity on so that they can get back into their homes, and that's just not happening. So I don't think the Red Cross should be withholding money when maybe they could just donate it and they could help people, but that's not what they do. They don't donate to any other organizations. What comes to them stays with them. And there's been a lot of controversy on how they've mishandled other funds, such as the 9/11 fund. And during 9/11, they received millions of dollars in aid, but more than half of it didn't go to the 9/11 families. They claimed that it needed to go into the Liberty Fund, which was a fund to fight terrorist attacks. Why is the Red Cross getting mixed up in something that should be like, I don't know, Homeland Security's job? Why are they so worried about protecting us from terrorism? Why don't they focus on helping the people in times of need? Why would that money be going towards a war fund? That is another conflict of interest. Seems like the government is stepping in and saying, hey, we need as much money as we can get to fight the war on terror. So why don't you guys put some of it our way? And of course, after they came under fire and were investigated, suddenly that money was returned to the fund that it was allocated to. But I guess you can go talk to families who suffered on that day and lost loved ones and find out if they really received any money from the Red Cross. I'm not sure if they did or not. I wasn't able to get enough research on that, where I had pages and pages to read through. So again, this is always a great opportunity for you guys to do your own research as well. I try to give a brief outline, but there is so much out there, and especially on the Red Cross. There has been quite a lot of controversy. There's other areas besides the disaster relief where the Red Cross has really fallen short, and that is in their blood supply. There have been a lot of allegations that the Red Cross could have done a lot more during the AIDS epidemic. The Red Cross stated that they were opposed to testing blood for HIV. So what that means is that they would rather you receive blood potentially infected with HIV than go through what could be an expensive process to ensure that the national blood supply was clean. They would rather just pay out settlements for people who sue. That's the priority of the Red Cross. Save as much money as possible and don't do the right thing. That doesn't sound very humanitarian to me. So, speaking of money needing to be saved, they make a lot of money off of these disasters, obviously, and there's actually a pretty hefty payroll. The big top CEOs of the Red Cross, which the fact that they have CEOs for a nonprofit organization is a little sketchy to me. But anyway, Gail McGovern, she's the CEO, and she makes over $500,000 a year. The CEOs in other parts of the country, they also clear well over $500,000 a year. Why do they need to make so much money? Isn't this for the good of the people? Shouldn't this be an organization of charity, of giving, of generosity, of selflessness? I don't understand why just because you run a very well-known organization, you need to bring in a six-figure salary. I think that Gail and the rest of the CEOs need to take a step back and reevaluate what their agenda really is and whether or not they really care where this money goes. And I think that it's clear that if that's the salary they're demanding, then they want to make sure that they sit cushy. But these are people who have been the head of a lot of other corporations before. Gail McGovern's history also includes heading AT&T and Fidelity Investments. So you can see where her head is at simply from her employment history. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a blurb from an article that I read. It was written by, ironically, a woman named Sandy Boyer, and it was posted November 19th. And she attacked Red Cross head on, saying that it felt like they were completely missing in action, and she pointed to the efforts of other groups, such as Occupy Sandy, that's really stepped up. So I just wanted to read this little quote at the end that she said. So the next time a disaster hits, don't wait for aid from the American Red Cross. Learn from Occupy Sandy. Get together with your neighbors and organize the relief the people in your community need. You'll get a lot more help than you would ever get from the Red Cross. And this is kind of the sentiment that a lot of people are feeling, is that they're tired of thinking that these organizations that parade around acting like they are for the good of the people and they are going to be there to help and they will be the first responders, they're falling short time and time again. Red Cross wouldn't even step foot into New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina happened. They thought it was too dangerous. So this is where we're at. They're too scared to go in there, but it's the community that steps up and are the real brave ones. They are the ones that will be in there day in, day out, risking tetanus, risking mold poisoning, risking hypothermia, and risking all kinds of contamination from sewage and who knows what else kind of garbage that has flown in and blown in and poured in from this storm. This is not an excuse. It's not okay to just pull out when you don't think the need is there anymore. It's not okay to not send people in when you think it's too unsafe. You don't think the residents feel unsafe, but that's what you're supposed to be there for. FEMA is supposed to protect the people. Red Cross is supposed to feed and shelter the people. And again, we are seeing that these are just facades. They are parading around and they're using their rhetoric to gain millions of dollars that go into the hands of the CEOs, and they go towards making their telecommunications departments better. They go into building better facilities and spending money on their fancy logos on everything. But how much aid really reaches the people that need it? And how much can the communities that suffer keep supporting themselves through donations? We are all stretched thin. We are all struggling to survive. And again, it takes the bravery and the courage and the selflessness of communities. And that is, unfortunately, all we have to rely on. But it's better than nothing, and it's still a beautiful thing. So while I could go on and on about the FEMA camps and go on and on about all the different controversial stories that I've heard about the Red Cross misallocating funds, I think you guys get the idea. And I'm glad you guys watch, and please feel free to do the research, and if you ever have any more gripes to send my way, you can email me at laurendee and then the number 85@gmail.com, and I'm happy to take any info you guys have. If you've got any ideas for the next upcoming show, feel free to shoot me that as well, and I'm still kind of deciding because this took up quite a bit of my time this week. You can also donate to our WePay account, which is at wepay.com/ I'm still learning all of these. Donations / jnl_live_1, and that's the number 1. I don't know how you guys keep up with all of these web addresses, because it's just too much for me. And then you guys can also follow us on Twitter, which is... I always forget to say it, babe.
JAK_NLAUREN, and that is at Jack _and Lauren, and the WePay, in case you didn't get that, is WePay.com/donations/JNL_live_1, and that is the number one. All contributions go towards our traveling expenses and getting to and from events and covering a variety of events. So no contribution is too small. We accept anything from $1 million to a penny. So feel free. Thank you guys so much for your love and support, really.
Thank you guys so much. We are going to continue to improve, and definitely tune in next week for the next show. And if you guys have any advice for me, feel free to let me know. We do plan on adding guests to the show, so I don't know who our first guest will be, but hopefully we can get somebody on the show next week to rant with me and give you guys a whole new dynamic. So thanks again for watching JNL Live. This is Rant Radio. Thanks so much, guys. I'm not good at rant because I feel like I'm gonna.
You're not off.
You totally
No,
are.
no.